You know that strange moment when you're sitting in a room and everyone else seems absolutely certain about something, and you're the only one who isn't convinced? Or maybe it's the opposite. Maybe you're the only one who is convinced. And suddenly the temperature of the room changes. People stop engaging with your idea and start engaging with you. Your tone, your motives, your sanity. Your nervous system feels it instantly. Shoulders tighten, your throat dries out. There's that quiet internal negotiation. Maybe I should just drop this. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it's not worth it. And the easiest move, the safest move, is to adjust your position just enough to match the crowd. Most of us have done it. Some of us do it every week. Now here's the part that bothers me. When people talk about Noah, the explanation is always very simple. Noah obeyed God. Everyone else disobeyed God. End of story. Which is true. But it's also incomplete. Because calling Noah's story obedience is a little like calling open-heart surgery a medical procedure. Technically correct. But it tells you almost nothing about what the experience actually felt like. I've sat with this text for years, and I'm convinced the Noah story isn't just about obedience. It's about what happens inside the human nervous system when you believe something the entire culture around you thinks is ridiculous. Actually, let me rephrase that. It's about what happens when truth isolates you. Stay with me on this. My name is John, and I love exploring the emotions and humanity of biblical characters. I enjoy seeing them from their human perspective while also balancing the theological side of Scripture. I believe we can learn a lot from these ancient men who tried to navigate the world without a compass and still sought to please God. Please like, share, and subscribe. You can also let me know in the comments any topic or biblical character you would like us to explore or what more you would like to see in future videos. Thank you. Genesis 6. The earth before the flood. You have to forget the children's storybook version for a moment. No pastel animals walking 2 by 2. No smiling bearded man with a hammer. Picture something heavier. The air is humid, dense, Mesopotamian heat pressing against the skin. The ground smells of damp soil and vegetation. In the distance, there's the steady rhythm of tools against wood. Noah is building something enormous. Not a boat you take fishing, a structure the size of a floating fortress. Timber beams stacked higher than any structure most people in that region had ever seen. And here's the strange part. There had been no rain. Let that sit for a second. The ancient world understood water differently. Genesis describes mist rising from the ground to water the earth. Rainstorms as we know them were not part of the cultural memory yet. So Noah is building a giant floating vessel in a dry landscape, under a clear sky. Imagine the conversations, neighbors stopping to stare, workers whispering, someone laughing from a distance. Hey Noah, where exactly is this boat going? You can almost hear it. The jokes, the sarcasm, the quiet social exile. And Noah keeps building, day after day, year after year. Which raises a psychological question the text never answers directly. What does it take for a human being to endure that level of social pressure and not collapse? Because here's what was happening underneath. Social psychologists have studied something called normative social influence. The research goes back decades, but Solomon Asch's famous conformity experiments still say it best. In those experiments, participants were asked simple questions about line lengths. The answer was obvious. But when a room full of actors intentionally gave the wrong answer, about a third of participants changed their response to match the group. Not because they believed the group, because they feared the isolation. Actually, no, that's not quite right either. They feared what isolation does to the nervous system. Human beings are wired for belonging. Our brains interpret exclusion as threat. The amygdala lights up. Cortisol rises. Your body starts behaving like something dangerous is happening. Which means Noah's obedience wasn't just theological. It was neurological resistance to conformity pressure. Every day he kept building the ark, he was pushing against the oldest survival instinct humans possess: do not become the outsider. Nobody talks about this part. Faith sometimes requires social pain. The text tells us humanity had become corrupt and violent. That's the moral diagnosis. But psychologically, imagine Noah's internal reality. He's watching an entire society move in a direction he believes is catastrophic. Every instinct in his body would be telling him something is wrong, and yet every external voice is telling him the opposite. That creates a very specific form of psychological tension. Isolation anxiety. Your chest tightens. Your mind runs endless calculations. What if I misunderstood God? What if everyone else is right? Faith in that environment doesn't feel heroic. It feels lonely. Actually, let me say that more plainly. The hardest part of faith isn't believing God. It's enduring the moment when everyone else believes you're wrong. You know that feeling when you post something online that goes against the dominant opinion of your social circle? Within minutes, the responses begin. Some are polite. Others are less so. A few people question your intelligence. Someone screenshots it. Someone calls it misinformation. And suddenly the issue isn't the idea anymore. It's you. Your character. Your motives. Your credibility. Which creates enormous psychological pressure to delete the post, apologize, and return to the group consensus. Stay with me on this. Because the deeper question isn't political, it's psychological. How does a person maintain conviction when the cost of conviction is social exile? History is full of moments when people who questioned the dominant narrative were mocked first and understood later. And that doesn't automatically mean every unpopular idea is true. That's important. But it does mean popularity is not a reliable measure of truth. Noah knew that before the rain ever fell. Here's the uncomfortable question in the story. God tells Noah about the coming flood, but the timeline is long. The ark takes decades to build, which means Noah lives for years inside a promise that hasn't happened yet. So here's the tension. What happens when faith requires sustained belief in something that hasn't materialized, while everyone around you treats that belief as delusion? I don't think we should rush past that question, because the Bible is filled with people living inside that exact psychological space, and it's not comfortable. Let me ask you something. Have you ever believed something strongly about your values, your faith, your convictions, while the people around you dismissed it or mocked it? What did that feel like? Not the theology of it, the feeling of it. Tell me that story in the comments. I will read them. All of them. When the rain finally comes in Genesis 7, the emotional tone of the story shifts instantly. The same ark that looked absurd becomes the only safe place on earth. Which is strange, actually, because the years of ridicule Noah endured suddenly become the years that saved his life. Psychologists call something similar meaning-making after adversity. When people endure prolonged stress for a belief or purpose, that suffering can later become the foundation of resilience. The ark isn't just a vessel. It's the physical embodiment of years of misunderstood faith. Every plank represents a moment when Noah chose conviction over approval. So what does that mean for us? If you've ever been the person in the room holding a conviction that wasn't popular, that tension you felt might not be a flaw. It might be the price of independent thought. Actually, let me rephrase that. The discomfort you feel when resisting collective pressure may be the nervous system's signal that your identity is still intact. Your willingness to question consensus, carefully, humbly, thoughtfully, is not social failure. It's intellectual courage. And historically speaking, every meaningful shift in human understanding began with someone willing to stand slightly outside the crowd. So here's something to watch this week. The next time you feel that moment of pressure, the subtle pull to agree with something simply because everyone else does. Pause for a second. Ask yourself a simple question. Is this popular, or is it true? Because Noah's story suggests something unsettling. Crowds can be wrong. Entire cultures can drift in destructive directions while believing they are perfectly reasonable. Which brings us back to the story we talked about last time. At Babel, humanity united around a shared ambition and built a tower to reach the heavens. It looked like strength. It looked like progress. But the unity itself became the danger. The psychology of Babel shows us what happens when people conform too easily. The psychology of Noah shows us what it costs when someone refuses to. And that leaves us with a question worth carrying into the week. When the pressure comes, and it always does, will you build the tower with everyone else, or will you build the ark?